gave me to understand him, that God gave me to understand him, you want me to turn that off so I can believe in his religion? Doesn't work like that. So that's the only way I could believe in any of the other faiths. And I read a book about Islam that said that Muslims worship the moon god called Allah, who lived in a box in the desert in Saudi Arabia, and they had wives whom they beat, and that the greatest duty that a Muslim could do was kill a non-Muslim, and that they would get virgins in heaven when they did so. So I wrote Islam off the list, and I swore to myself that I ever saw a Muslim, I'm going to kung fu him to death, or call the FBI. And so I left religion, and I became a student of the streets at a young age, going on 17 in my 17 years old. I became a student of the streets. And once again, I'm a perfectionist at heart, so I wanted to become a proper street gangster. I wanted to become a proper street thug. How some of our shabab are lost in that lifestyle. I looked like a clown, and that's what a lot of our shabab are doing, running around thinking that they're proper street gangsters, coming from middle class families, and they're only looking like clowns in the process. And I was getting into all kinds of trouble, fights, was getting arrested for fights, and lost my scholarship because of this, and eventually got into 2 near-death experiences that I shouldn't have lived from, a car accident that I should not have lived from, that the car was utterly destroyed, and I walked away with it with only a scratch. A man tried to rob me at gunpoint in New York City, put a gun in my face and pulled the trigger and tried to blow my head off on Fulton Avenue in Brooklyn. Didn't happen. The gun didn't go off, and I ended up getting away from that incident. So needless to say, I came to a point where I realized that God had a purpose for my life. And this is what everyone was telling me. The police officer told me that in the wreck. My grandmother told me after the gun incident that God has a purpose for your life, and you need to figure out what it is, because you don't live through things like this without God's hand playing a role in it. So I decided to search for a religion. I became a deist who did not believe in religion, but I believed in God. I didn't think there was a religion out there that was correct. So I was, at that point in my life, I was on my hands and knees on a daily basis, asking God for guidance, asking him that if you want me to know the truth, you need to show it to me. And I eventually met a Muslim whom I had known for quite some years. And the only reason I didn't know he was a Muslim because I thought all Muslims were Arabs, and he was African American. And I didn't know that Muslims, along with their killing non-Muslims and beating their wives and worshiping their moon god in the desert and all that good stuff and riding camels, and I didn't know that they could sell drugs, which is what this guy did as a profession. He sold cannabis for a living. So I didn't know that he was a Muslim. But one day I was mentioning religion in front of him, and he asked me if I'd ever heard about Islam. And I told him, yeah, I've heard all about Islam. And he was like, well, I'm a Muslim. And I laughed in his face. I said, yeah, that's a nice joke, but I don't think you should tell anybody else. And I was like, I'm not talking about 5%ers or Nation of Islam. What I'm talking about, real Islam. He was like, no, I'm real Muslim. I was like, you can't be because you're black. He's like, I know that, but I'm Muslim. I was like, Muslims are Arabs. He's like, no, the minority of Muslims are Arabs. And come to find out, he told me everything I knew about Islam was complete rubbish. So I asked him, what is Islam all about? And he told me he couldn't tell me because he wasn't the best Muslim. He had no right to even tell me about Islam. But he could take me to the mosque for Jummah to show me about Islam. And when I agreed to that, I come to find out, to my knowledge, I asked him where the mosque was, and he said it was on Wadehampton Boulevard. And I laughed because I lived off of Wadehampton Boulevard, and I had never seen a mosque my entire life. And when I asked him, I said, okay, quit playing games with me. Where there's no mosque on Wadehampton Boulevard. He said, you know where Lee Road intercepts Wadehampton Boulevard? I said, yeah, I live on Lee Road, buddy. And there's no mosque. Believe me, no mosque around there. And he said, you know that missionary training facility on the corner? I said, yeah, I used to train to be a missionary there. No mosques, buddy. He said, you know that little brick building that shares the same parking lot with the church, with the little gold cap on top? I'm like, yep. The gym? He's like, nope, that's the mosque. So come to find out, I live right down the street from a mosque my entire life. And I was surprised and shocked that I lived down the street from these crazy Muslims my whole life, and I'd never known. And the worst part about that is that mosque burnt down a few years prior, and when I was attending the missionary school, there was a box outside in the parking lot for donations to rebuild this building. And since I thought it was the gym, I was steadily putting money in this box to rebuild this temple of devil worship, man. So I'm like, man, I'm going to hell for sure now. So I helped build a mosque before I was ever a Muslim. So I went to the mosque on Friday for Jummah. I didn't go inside. I sat outside in the parking lot and watched all the Arabs go in the building, because that's all that went in the building were Arabs and maybe some Pakistanis, but at that time you all looked the same to me. A couple of Africans, but no Americans. So I was like, yep, I was right. All Muslims are Arabs except for a few Africans. And the guy who invited me, Musa, he didn't show up. And I was paging him, he didn't show up because come to find out later, he actually got arrested that day. He went to jail. But the Imam came and parked in front of me. I didn't know he was the Imam, but he invited me inside, and he was a very humble, soft-spoken man named Muhammad, go figure. So he invited me in and gave me a chair in the back of the masjid. And I was sitting here looking at all these Arabs, and I'm just going to give you this last part because it's quite interesting for you. I want you to think about this as well when you have non-Muslims in your midst. That he put me in the back and gave me a chair. And in front of me were all of these Arabs and Pakistanis, and behind me there was a curtain with a bunch of women chattering behind there, and I didn't see the women go in because their entrance was on the other side, and my thought was probably they have too many bruises from all the beatings that their husbands give them. That's why they had to be behind the curtain. And I started to think, I was 18 at the time, delusions of grandeur. I started thinking, and I like to describe it, and people laugh because it's funny. I just started to describe it. If any of you have kids, you know what I mean. My spider sense started going off at this time. How many of you know Spider-Man? If you have kids, you know Spider-Man. Even though we try to keep our kids away from these things, Spider-Man is all over the place. My son is a Spider-Man fanatic, and I don't know how he got it. But Spider-Man, when he's in danger, he starts to tingle. He knows when there's danger around, and I started tingling when I was in this mosque, big time. Because I thought to myself, because Musa disappeared. I didn't know he was locked up yet. I thought that, I bet you that, because this guy Musa is not trustworthy, you know what I mean? This is a guy who I know he's a proper street gangster, you know what I mean? He's a proper criminal. And I'm like, I bet you this guy Musa set me up, man. I bet you he probably either works with these Arabs because he was all about the money, and Arabs, they got money. I said he's either working for them, probably he works for them, enticing all the non-Muslims to come to the mosque for Jummah, so that they could do their little jihad and get their virgins and go to heaven. So I'm like, I'm probably the sacrificial lamb today. You know what I mean? They probably gonna get me, because this is South Carolina. The KKK is still prevalent in this part of the world. People get dragged out and disappear in the woods all the time, man. I'm like, man, I'm properly set up. But then the Imam got up on the minbar, and I looked and I said, oh, that's the leader. I don't think that he would tell people to kill me. He was very soft-spoken. I have a general vibe about people. I can feel people. So he got up on the minbar and he started his sermon. Inna alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu. I was like, oh my God, he's talking about me. They're gonna get me for sure. I'm done. Because he's yelling for about 3 minutes in Arabic, pounding on this thing, pointing in my direction. So now I'm freaking out. I got to get out of the building. I'm going to knock out some of these Arabs and get out of here. I'm looking for the old men, how many of them I can take out on my way out. I think about going from the sisters, but all of us know you don't wrangle with a group of women. That's the last thing you want to do. And that might be where they keep the weapons. So I'm not going that way. But I'm freaking out. And when the Imam starts to translate what he says, it's some of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. That all praise belongs to God. We praise Him. We seek His help. We ask for His forgiveness. We seek refuge in the Creator from the evils that lie within our own souls and our sinful actions. Whomsoever God guides to the truth is guided and cannot be misguided. And whomsoever He sends astray for whatever reason He chooses to do so cannot be guided except by Him. And I bear witness that nothing has the right to be worshipped except the one Creator, Allah. And that Muhammad is indeed the messenger and slave and servant of God. I was like, wow, and he started quoting verses of the Quran, the 3 that we do during the beginning of the khutbah. And I was like, man, this is profound. This is profound. And I have not forgotten this khutbah to this day. I can replay the audio in my head. That his whole khutbah was on the forgiveness of God. The forgiveness of Allah, that it is open to everyone at any time and any place without discretion. And that there are only 3 ways that you could definitely not be forgiven. And the first one is if your soul has reached your throat. After that point, that means death has approached you, forgiveness is gone. He also said if the sun has risen from the west. I had no idea what the man was talking about at the time. He said, and the third way is that if you knowingly worship anything except for the Creator, knowingly. He said, other than that, you can be forgiven. And he quoted a story about our Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam and Angel Gabriel, Angel Jibril alayhi salam. And the story is too long because I want to get to our topic. But he said that there's a story that is very famous about when